Well, welcome to the next episode of the Christ-Centered Cosmic Civilization as we continue to explore the revelations of the Magi, this ancient book from, at least portions of it, from the 2nd century, which purports to be written by at least some of the Magi and details the backstory to the visit of the Magi. And we've seen how the story goes back to the time of Adam and Seth, and knowledge is passed down in book form through Noah and on, and how preparations were made to be ready for the birth of God, the fulfillment of the promise of Genesis 3:15, and gifts were prepared also, and we'll see a little bit more about that in this week as we go further into the revelations of the Magi. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this more quotations, and we've had this idea that the gifts have been preserved in the cave of the treasures of mysteries. But what I wanted to do is in the book, they're told in the traditions that have been passed down to them from the ancients, they are to be careful and to command your sons, it says. And if the star's light does not come in your lifetime, have your sons tell their sons. Do this until the mysteries and revelations written about his coming come true. So that's what's been upon them, and for many generations, these wise men and kings of the East. And we've seen that at least some of them are from China, bordering the Pacific Ocean. And this has been passed down to them, and they've had this very, very high view of the divine Messiah who's going to be born. And everything that they have connected to this, the books, the gifts, everything, has been preserved in something that they call the Cave of Treasures, the Cave of the Treasures of the Mysteries. And that's on the Mountain of Victories. And we don't know where that location is, because, of course, we thought they must have had to keep that secret. But they had, in each generation, it looks as if some of these sons of the kings would be appointed to basically live at the cave, live on the Mountain of Victories, near to this Cave of Treasures, to wait. And each month there seem to be at least 3 ritual days, which they're basically, if they're doing a lunar month, and PJ thinks they probably are doing a lunar month, that there's what the rituals are grouped so that there's one on day 25, one on day 1, and one on day 3. So that's really almost like a week. All of those would be included within a week at the end of one month and the beginning of the next month. So it could be that for 3 weeks they could go away and get things done, but they all had to conglomerate together at the end of one lunar month, and at the beginning of the next lunar month, they would all gather together to perform kind of rituals of waiting and preserving it. So let me read from that. It says, we went to the cave, to the Mountain of Victories. We all gathered at the foothills. We came from our homes. And we'll think in future episodes of what homes these Magi may be coming from, what kingdoms and empires. But they came, it says, and they gathered at the foothills, so they were living together at the foothills of the Mountain of Victories. And it says here, we stayed in one place to purify ourselves on the 25th day of each month. And that's interesting then. So they purify themselves at the beginning of this week together. And this is how they did it. It says this: we bathed in a spring at the foothills of the mountain. The spring is called the spring of purification. 7 trees stood around it, an olive tree, a vine, a myrtle, a cypress, an orange, a cedar, and a juniper. And then they talk about how the mountain's beautiful and the smell of the spring, the water is amazing smell and things. But there we go. What do you make of this? That they are purifying themselves, and that there are these 7 trees around the spring of purification.
I think it's interesting that the people who were in charge of preserving these mysteries, perhaps because it's in China and you've got that idea of feng shui, where like to be able to really be perceptive of mysteries and truth and to be in the right mindset, you've got to have the decor and the smell of things, and all of that has to be right. And so it's interesting, these Chinese rulers have decided to make this cave of mysteries all well designed, in terms of interior design and all this sort of thing. And then for there to be a sort of garden, a Zen garden's like a Japanese thing, but I think there's Chinese sort of equivalents. So it's interesting that.
And these trees, I am sure that they will each be representative or symbolic of things that the fact that there are 7 of them, 7 days in a week and so on, and that an olive, a vine, a myrtle, a cypress, an orange, a cedar, a juniper. I haven't actually done the research of where these occur in the Bible. The olive, the vine, the myrtle. I mean, I can think of some references in my head, but now I'm wishing I'd looked them all up, because I'm sure that there's great significance in them. So they have this purification time where they bathe, I guess, in the spring of purification to wash themselves outwardly, but presumably that was a trigger for them to be clean inwardly also. And then they'd have these few days of preparation, 3 full days of preparation of purification. And then it says, and now going back to the book, here's a quotation. When the first day of the month came, we climbed to the top of the mountain. We stood before the entrance of the cave of treasures of hidden mysteries. We knelt and stretched our hands to heaven. We prayed and worshipped silently. We prayed to the Father of that heavenly majesty. He is beyond words and is infinite forever. And then on the 3rd day of the month, we entered the cave. We went to the treasures. These treasures were prepared as the stars' own gifts. They were for the worship of that light we were waiting for. So there we go. They purify themselves. Then they go up the mountain, and then on the 3rd day, they go into the cave to check that the gifts are all right.
Yeah, and if you want, on that particular, like, what days which and everything, if you want to read more about that, St. Bede has a book called The Book of Timekeeping, and he goes into what's the biblical method of calculating time. But Philo also says that he mentions how you'd have people on a watchtower, and they'd try and look at what a new moon is, and then they'd announce it. So that idea that you have exactly 28 days, that was important to a lot of ancient Christians, because there's a lot of times in the Bible it will just mention what day of the month it is, and you've got to figure out what day of the year it is from that. And you can do in this idea of it, so that in a sidereal lunar calendar, it takes like the month, it takes the moon 27 days to reach the exact same point in the sky. So then if you calculate from the next day over, like when it's starting a new sort of cycle, you get to 28 days. And so that's what Philo and Bede and the others say. And so it's worth just noting that. And then next time you're reading through the Bible, note when it says, on this day of the month, you just add, you go like the first day of the month then is a Sunday, and then just add on from there. What day of the week is it? Because that might be important, that, maybe some people die on a Friday, and then you think, wow, that's, an interesting day for that to happen. And then it was also in the early church a huge dispute between then, once everyone moved to Julius Caesar's calendar or Alexander's calendar, lunar solar versions, how do you carry that across where days don't match up properly? But for systems where it did, and like in this Syriac sort of book, it does still work that way. That's what you got to keep in mind. But then, not just for this book, it's worth keeping that in mind for the Bible.
This podcast and all my work depends entirely on donations. It's only through your support that all this research and teaching can be free for so many. If you're in a position to help, please consider supporting the mission by giving to the Biblical Frameworks charity. Find out how at biblicalframeworks.com and look for the Give link. Thank you. Yeah, so they would meet on Thursday for purification, Sunday for worship, and then Tuesday, that was when they'd examine the treasures. Okay, now the book then tells... So all of that is just background. Everything we've done so far is background. And then it says in this book of the Revelations of the Magi, it says the time came. Everything written in the books about the star's light being revealed was fulfilled. Each of us saw wonderful and different visions we'd never seen before. And so what happened was, when they have these visions that are telling them the time has come, it says each of us came from his home, as was our old custom. So they'd all perhaps gone back to their homes wherever they were, and then they quickly travelled, and it says we went up the mountain of victories, washed in the spring of purification, as we always did. And then it says this, we saw an indescribable pillar of light. It came down and rested above the water. We were afraid and trembled when we saw it. We cannot describe the star's brilliant light. Its brightness was many times greater than the sun. We rejoiced and praised God. We gave endless thanks to the Father of heavenly majesty. The light appeared in our days. We were thought worthy to see it. We joyfully bathed in the spring of purification. We climbed the mountain of victories as usual. We went up and we found the pillar of light in front of the cave. Again, great fear came upon us. We knelt, stretched out our hands according to our old custom. We silently praised the wonderful vision. We saw that heaven had opened like a great gate. Men of glory carried the star of light in their hands. They came down and stood on the pillar of light. The entire mountain was filled with its light. No human can express this. Something like the hand of a small person came near us. It came from the pillar and the star, and the hand comforted us. We saw the star enter the cave of treasures of hidden mysteries, and the cave shone brightly. Wow, so the time had come. And here you'll see that, nowadays people tend to go, I don't know what you make of this, PJ, that nowadays they'll sort of go, oh, Halley's Comet was around it, and then they'll come up with some time frame that's somewhat close to, they say, oh, maybe there was Halley's Comet at 5 AD, or I don't know what. And then they're imagining, oh, that was what it was. The Magi probably saw Halley's Comet or something, or like a comet. But, or I've heard other people try to say it was an alignment of planets or something that they saw. But I think the problem with all those kind of things is modern people are easily impressed. They can kind of go outside and see like a Halley's Comet or an alignment of planets. And modern people are like, whoa, probably something weird's going on. What does this mean? They're very easily impressed, moderns, and kind of superstitious about things like that. But I think ancients were much more level-headed, and they'd be like, well, that's just a comet. That doesn't mean like some total cosmic mysteries happening. These things happen every 70 odd years, and that's nothing. And an alignment of planets. We know what planets are. We know what an alignment of planets are. That in itself is not revealing the hidden mysteries of the Father. They wouldn't have been so easily impressed by strange lights in the sky as moderns get very superstitious about things like that. So the ancients, in here, this confirms that, because the star is something that is not at all like a natural phenomena. It obviously isn't an actual star that would be enormously huge, but it's something that's like a star is something that it seems to come out of heaven itself, doesn't it? And then travels down. There's a pillar of light that also is present, and the pillar of light is brighter than the sun by far. And then there is also this thing that's a star that is carried by glory men. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I think it is definitely worth thinking, like, how much did they know about astronomy in the ancient world? And so people often underestimate, because they're like, oh, we could only get the lenses to see some of the stuff very recently. But what's quite remarkable is that in like ancient China, they describe Jupiter's many moons. But people are like, well, they can't do, because like the lenses to invent that, like even Galileo couldn't make these out properly. So like properly. So like it was since then. It's like only in the last 500 years or so we've been able to get anything like it, and then clear pictures to think, oh, these are definitely separate objects orbiting Jupiter. But in ancient China, it's just like, yeah, they are. And actually, probably all cultures probably had this knowledge, because in all these cultures, Jupiter is the king of the gods, and he's got all these attendants that come with him everywhere. And that seems to, the reason they thought the planet Jupiter was him is because of all these moons. So that's the detail and precision. They really understand extraterrestrial bodies. They understand this very well. And even indigenous Australians, they have carved into the rocks, very ancient rocks, very ancient carvings, the exact number of stars there are in Pleiades and things. And you can't make this out with, like, again, very in the last 100 years that was to us in Europe. They knew all this stuff, and how we don't know, but like they also know. So it's like their knowledge of what the actual bodies of the stars floating around are. They understand that very, very well. So when they seem to think of stars as not just this body, there's something else to stars, and really they're angels and things. Yeah. That means something. This is true. There is, and we get it all throughout the Bible, and that should be enough for us. But like, when we think, like, people just trusting that these planets and stars and so on are celestial persons, in addition to this body, and somehow they can kind of be two things at once. Yeah. Trusting that, they got this incredible knowledge that we need all this like gizmos and things for. They could just do it with apparently their bare eyes, as far as we can tell. Like, absolutely incredible when you think about it.
It is, like, they clearly possessed extremely vast and precise knowledge of astrological objects, what we would call the inhabitants of the second heaven. And they did that without the equipment that we have today. And so maybe they had means of observing the second heaven that are unknown to us. They had either greater technologies or greater some completely different manner of seeing and knowing that is not that we because I always feel that we today are very low level compared to the ancients in the knowledge of the universe and the human body and so on. So they are not going to be just impressed by normal astronomical phenomena. But what happens is there's this star that comes out of heaven, and in the Bible you will know that stars are angels, and this presumably is the explanation for this star that's carried down and is given this task. And they see this, and then they go into the cave and check it all out, but they're very afraid. But there's basically Jesus appears to them. And that pillar of light that was brighter than any sun and indescribably bright that they can't articulate, that is Jesus, basically. It is God the Son. And this is a bit that I find difficult in the revelations of the Magi, because it appears that he is present with them to talk to them, but he's also being born in the womb of Mary at the same time. And I struggle with that, this idea. Let me just read what it says, and then we'll try to process it a little bit. The light gathered itself together. It appeared to us in the physical form of a small, humble person. He said to us, "Peace be with you, sons of my hidden mysteries. I will fulfill the Father's love, even to the death on a cross. I will come down for their salvation. I'll raise them up with me in love and constant peace if they believe in me. Take the treasure. Your Father's placed it in this cave. Go with joy and worship. I will be born like a human being. Worship me there. Even now, as I speak with you, I am also there. My gospel has been announced by angels. I am both there and with my Father's majesty. I am everywhere. I'm a ray of light. My light has shone in this world from the majesty of my Father. He sent me to fulfill everything spoken about me. This was spoken in the whole world and in every land through unspeakable mysteries. I'm here to carry out the command of my glorious Father, preached about me through the prophets." Okay, so, wow, Jesus is there, and he's kind of going to commission them to take the gifts and then go and worship him. But he's claiming, the idea is he's both present with them and present with Mary and present with the Father in the majesty of heaven. Have you got any reaction to that, PD? Because that is not at all the way we would think.
Yeah, there are, to give an example, in Ethiopia, there's 2 sets of liturgies they have for people on either side of this dispute of it exactly.
Because it's a long-term dispute. Do you want to explain the dispute? Yeah.
So in Ethiopia, there's one group of people called the Kebatoch. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but they have that view where it's like when Jesus humbles himself and he empties himself, he really does become just a human being like us in every way, meaning he can't be omnipresent because that humans aren't. And so then he hasn't totally humbled himself. He's just attached to himself yet another thing. And that thing may be humble, but he's got this vast amount of glory everywhere. So they're like, that can't be true. But then you get other people and they write these other, stuff a bit like this, where they're like, yeah, he's sort of everywhere and he's sort of there in a different way, or he's there in the flesh sort of thing. So they're both in the Ethiopic church. They both sort of side by side. I think other churches often have a bit of a hard line. They're like, no, you've got to pick one side. Whereas I think in the modern Tawhid stuff, they're happy to have both.
They can cope with those who believe that Christ is omnipresent in as the divine human. And then others who were like, no, it can't be. He's like, that would be a denial of his humanity or whatever. You get the same sort of thing in a different way in the argument between Lutherans and Calvinists, where is Christ present in the bread and the wine? And the Lutherans are like, yeah, he's fully present as the divine human everywhere, therefore specifically in the bread and the wine. And then the Calvinists tend to say, no, as a divine human, he's present only at the right hand of the Father. They also, though, have a different thing, and they have it like Christ is present as a in his divinity only in many other places, or omnipresent in his divinity, but as a God-man only present in one place. But let's not get too lost in the complexity. But it's like that kind of a debate even happens among Protestants as well. But and
then in Catholicism, you've got like actual presence in the bread and wine, and then a sort of mediated presence is everywhere else.
Right.
So then it's like that is. So they have it that way. So if he's actually somewhere, he's got to be human and divine. But then he can have mediated things, and that might be more spiritual and more like, but then it's like, for Jesus to be actually somewhere, he has to be flesh and blood human being.
Yeah, and I've noticed this debate about modes of omnipresence and presence comes up in orthodoxy in relation to the essence and energies of God and what it means to be omnipresent, and then have a different sense present in specific locations. So I don't know whether the revelations of the Magi doesn't get into all the. They're just like, this is what he said to us, that I am here and there and there, the majesty of the Father. I don't know quite how to digest all that, but that's what they testify to. Then let me speed on, because there's a very strange thing, and this happens several times in the book, that they all have witnessed. They basically take the treasure out of the cave. They go down the mountain full of praise and get ready to start the journey. But as they're walking down the mountain, they're discussing with each other, what did they see when Jesus appeared to them in a vision? And it is a vision. Maybe that's how to solve this. He's appearing to them in a vision. Anyway, they say, let me read it. Because they each see Jesus in a very different way. They don't all see the same thing. And this happens quite a bit in this book, that when they encounter Christ, they each perceive him in different ways. They see different things. So let me read this. Each of us spoke about the revelations and visions he'd seen in the cave of treasures of hidden mysteries. But our visions were all different. The wonders we saw were of many forms. One of us said, I saw a light. There were many amazing images in it. Another said, I saw a baby with forms I cannot describe. Another said, I saw a youth, and he had no form that exists in this world. Another said, I saw a human being who was humble, unappealing, and poor. Another said, I saw a cross. A person of light was hanging on it. He was taking away the sins of the world. Another said, I saw him go down to the underworld with power. All the dead rose and worshipped him. Another said, I saw him ascend in glory. He opened the graves and raised the dead. They were crying out and saying, Holy is our King. Holy is his descent to us. Because of our sins, he humbled himself to save us. So that's an interesting thing, how they each perceive the vision differently, and each of them seem to be seeing different aspects of Christ.
And you get that whenever people see the throne room in heaven, they're seeing the same room, they're seeing an actual reality. They seem to attest that this is an actual place, and time, you got actual time there, and people wait half an hour and all of this. They seem to attest this, but then they also see, like, I looked at Jesus one moment, he looked like a lamb, and the next moment he's like this, and that,
yeah, he's a lion. He's a lamb, he's a lion, he's a human, yeah.
So it does, like, change a lot. Like, it does seem as if, and that idea that you've got more than just the three normal dimensions of space may be active, in heaven, so that things could be like, there are different angles to look at things beyond just spinning around in, like, height, width, and length. But, there's another tesseract thing.
Yeah. And also, we sometimes will say, when we're having our photo taken, we'll say, take me from this angle, because I look best from that angle. Whereas from a different angle, we feel we look different. And we might say, I look too stern, or I look ugly, or I look tired from that side. Whereas and it's that way in which it's as if maybe the full dimensions of us appear, but not us, let's forget about us, but Christ. Christ has so many different facets to him, and heights and depths, and only the Father knows the Son. And like nobody else, only the Father can see the Son in every dimension and aspect of him. Whereas for us, we'll see him and then he'll present to us one of these infinite facets of himself. And we're like, oh, he's like the one on the cross taking away the sins of the world. And then the other Magi goes, no, I saw him as this poor, unassuming, humble human. And then someone else like, no, I saw him ascending in glory. But they're all just seeing this one Lord Jesus Christ who has all these infinite wonders about him. And we'll, of course, throughout all eternity, be always seeing more and glimpses and of these aspects of him. So I love that. Maybe we'll end with them doing their journey and then arriving at Jerusalem. And then we'll do one more episode about the revelations of the Magi next week. So let me read from it. We prepared our camp, we gathered our supplies and the pure holy gifts, the gifts we took from the cave of treasures. The star, our guide, our good messenger, our perfect light, our leader, appeared to us again, and this star went ahead of us. It protected our whole group from all sides. It lit us up with its hidden light. We didn't need the light of the sun or the moon. Their light became dim in its presence. We walked in its light day and night. We were joyful and happy. We had no trouble or tiredness. It prepared a safe place for us to stop. We rested and rejoiced there. Even our supplies seemed plentiful and did not decrease. They actually increased each day when the star stopped over us with its light. It gave us rest from all fatigue. It felt like we weren't travelling at all. We walked across the rivers in front of us without fear. This was because of the light of our good guide. It went with us for our camp, and when we crossed into places with wild animals and dangerous snakes, we stepped on them. Our leader and guide appeared to each of us in all forms at every stop. He filled our hearts with great joy. All the journeys we made seemed short and fast to us. Our victorious sign and powerful light, which is beyond words, guided us with its strength. We arrived in the area of Jerusalem in the month of April. Well, it does sound a little bit, PJ, like the book of Numbers when Christ it's the Spirit who's the pillar of cloud and fire, and the angel of the Lord in the pillar of cloud and fire. And remember, as they were traveling through the wilderness, they were guided with light, and the clothes didn't wear out, and food was given to them in the wilderness wanderings. It does sound a little bit like that, doesn't it?
And I think even Matthew wants us to think about this in his slightly shorter account of the Magi, where if they're coming from the east and they reach Jerusalem, they do, of course, cross the Jordan, and they're led by this light.
Yes.
That is, I think, even within Matthew, that is part of it, that you've got a new Exodus. These Gentiles are going through an Exodus, because you get that promised in the Old Testament, like, Egypt will get an Exodus and all this. All the nations need Exodus, from sin and into the land Jesus has promised them. And the wise men actually get quite a close reproduction of the Exodus experience. But also the new creation, that idea where Jesus' light is so much brighter that you can't see the sun and moon. You get that, there's no need for the sun and moon anymore. But I suppose with the difference being in that prophecy, the Lord makes the sun and moon 7 times brighter so you can see them. Whereas if he did that yet, that would be an apocalypse. Mm-hmm. But so he hasn't done that yet. But otherwise, they get to experience a sort of new creation thing.
Yeah, they do, don't they? Yeah. It must have been this wonderful experience where there's no tiredness, nothing gets worn out, there's just food. They don't have to sweat by their brow to get food. It's just provided for them instantly. It's like, this is how the creation's supposed to be. And even as they travel through the wilderness east of the Jordan, which is what they're doing, they are having this exodus coming to the one who is the light and the possibility of new creation and everything like that. Well, next time we'll find out briefly what happened at Jerusalem. We don't want to spend too much time on a loser like Herod, and because we want to rush to what happens when they get to the baby Jesus.